Well, good evening. Welcome to Sunday, Writing for Peace Sunday Live. I'm Brad Wetzler, and it's been a big weekend, a lot of big feelings, I suppose, for a lot of us. And I couldn't be happier tonight to have with us Ashley M. Jones, poet, essayist, and it turns out a tap dancer too. I just learned. So anyway, I welcome everybody, and I'm really excited for tonight. Let me read a bio about Ashley. Ashley M. Jones holds an MFA in poetry from Florida International University, and she's the author of Magic City Gospel, Hub City Press, 2017, Dark Thing, Pleiades Press, 2019, and Reparations Now, Hub City Press, 2021. Her poetry has earned several awards, including the Rona Jaffe Foundation Writers Award, the Silver Medal in the Independent Publishers Book Award, the Lena Miles Weaver Todd Prize for Poetry, a Literature Fellowship from the Alabama State Council on the Arts, and the Lucille Clifton Poetry Prize and the Lucille Clifton Legacy Award. She was a finalist for the Ruth Lilly Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Fellowship in 2020. Her poems and essays appear in or are forthcoming at CNN Poetry, the Oxford American, Origins Journal, The Quarry by Split This Rock, Obsidian, and many others. She teaches at the Alabama School of Fine Arts. She co-directs Penn Birmingham, and she is the founding director of the Magic City Poetry Festival. So welcome, Ashley. It's a thrill to have you here tonight. I usually start out with a question about something you've read in your formative years, childhood, or even include college, I suppose, that changed everything for you. Some book, some poem. What comes up for you with that?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I had muted myself, not realizing that that was going to be mute jail, in fact. Yeah, so a book that sort of spurred me on my way.
Yeah.
So I would have to say, without question, this book called Honey, I Love by Eloise Greenfield. It's a book of poems written, I think, specifically for children, and it's about just Blackness, honestly. All the poems in that book deal with different facets of Blackness. And the poem that specifically sort of made me decide I wanted to write poetry is a poem called Harriet Tubman, which I had to recite in the second grade. And reciting that piece sort of filled me with a certain sort of power and spirit, and even just a way of speaking that I'd always wanted, to have this just all-encompassing, powerful Blackness. And from that day on, I started writing poems in a little notebook, and I just kept doing it.
Wonderful. Wow. Well, I'd like to start off with you reading something just right off the bat. So what do you have planned for us tonight?
Well, I have, in this first little section, I selected 3 poems that, well, you'll see, I'll just go piece by piece. The first one actually is topical in that there were a lot of people on social media after the election results, well, I guess during the week of election results, who decided to say things like, oh, we blame these red states, these southern states, et cetera, et cetera. And the thing that I extract from that is this frustration I've had for a long time as a Southerner, where people believe that every oppressive thing was born here and that it only exists here, when that is not true at all. We can look all the way back to the founding of our nation to find things that are maybe not quite right. So this poem, which is actually a sonnet, addresses that, and it starts with an epigraph from Dr. King. It's called All Y'all Really from Alabama. The straitjackets of race prejudice and discrimination do not wear only Southern labels. The subtle psychological technique of the North has approached in its ugliness and victimization of the Negro, the outright terror and open brutality of the South. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Why We Can't Wait. This here, the cradle of this here nation. Everywhere you look, roots run right back south. Every vein filled with red dirt, blood, cotton. We the dirty word you spit out your mouth. Mason-Dixon is an imagined line. You can theorize it or wish it real, but it's the same old ghost, see-through, benign. All y'all from Alabama. We the wheel turning cotton to make the nation move. We the scapegoat in a land built from death. No longitude or latitude disproves the truth of founding fathers' sacred oath. We hold these truths like dark snuff in our jaw. Black oppression's not happenstance, it's law. So the second piece that I want to read is from my first book. I should have mentioned that one was from my forthcoming collection that I just read, which is called Reparations Now. And this is from my first book, Magic City Gospel, which maybe is visible through the Zoom camera. But this is a piece that I actually read at every tour stop that I did for this first book, because it had a sort of settling effect on me. Like I felt less nervous after I had read it. And I think it's because to me, it was me inviting in the spirit of this particular powerful Black woman whose name was Sally Hemings. And for those who aren't familiar with her, she was one of Thomas Jefferson's slaves. And it used to be that people would call her his mistress or his lover, girlfriend, whatever. But those names don't exactly make sense because as a slave, she was property and could not give consent to be any of those things. And so I wanted to write a piece about her that sort of gave a more rounded picture, well-rounded picture of her life. What it means to say Sally Hemings. Bright girl, Sally. Mulatto, Sally. Well-dressed, Sally. Sally with the pretty hair, Sally with the Irish cotton dress, Sally with the smallpox vaccine, Sally smelling of clean white soap, Sally never farmed a day in her life, available Sally, nursemaid Sally, Sally filled with milk, Sally gone to Paris with master's daughter, Sally in the chamber with the president, Sally in the chamber with the president's brother, illiterate Sally, capable Sally, unmarried Sally. Sally, mother of Madison, Harriet, Beverly, Easton. Sally, mother of Easton, who changed his name. Sally, mother of Easton, Hemings, Jefferson. Easton, who made cabinets. Easton, who made music. Easton, who moved to Wisconsin. Easton, whose children were Jeffersons. Easton, who died a white man. Grandmother Sally of the white Hemingses. Infamous Sally. Silent Sally. Sally kept at Monticello until Jefferson's death. Sally, whose children were freed without her. And the last one in this set is also from the new book, and it's about my family. We are a very close bunch, we Joneses, and I wrote this piece on an airplane actually last year, I want to say, when I was on tour for the second book, and I really missed home and my siblings and my parents. And so in a stroke of, I don't know if it's genius or just weirdness, I decided to watch all the security camera footage from my parents' house because I have the app connected to my phone. So I just started watching them do normal things on their security camera. And so I decided to write this poem because I miss them, but also because I was, nearing 30 at that time. I just turned 30 a few months ago, which I know is not that old, but I've never been 30 before. So it's, new to me. And so I've been thinking about the passage of time and things that happen, inevitably when that time passes. So this is in the form called the Hustle, which I can explain later if people want. And it's called Home Security. 2,300 miles away from home, and I'm watching the tiny camera attached to the back of my parents' house. Brother dragging the black trash bin to the curb, sisters hum to the back door with her key and bag in hand, the breaths of our quiet house. I've been thinking lately about time, how it will come for me and my family will steal these bones, the flesh that guards like a house. I've been thinking about getting older, the way it seems like some years pass quick as a snap, my life between two fingers, my body an aging house, the cracks and creaks down the halls. How did I become so old that I can start to see the end of this horizon? My mind a house full of impending pain, imminent pain. My father's face a tomb of tears at his mother's grave. My mother's sighs through the Greensboro house, now emptied of my grandmother's body. The way a headstone smiles, come now. Did you think you'd really live forever? On the home security camera, my house looks indestructible, the cars unmoving, as if everyone has come home to stay. Looking at them walk in and out of the house, my parents and my siblings look something like strangers. How the camera's dumb eye can't capture memory, just pixels and pigments. It can't keep my house from becoming a pile of wood and shingled crumb. Can't keep those living in it from dissolving into darkness, dirt, the big house I imagine as heaven. Maybe then, my angel parents wave me home from their golden porch. They say, Ashley, we've been waiting. Come on in the house.
Thank you. As I was listening to the first poem, all y'all really from Alabama, I was reminded of a quote. It feels like an important poem to read tonight, and thank you for reading that. Reminded of that famous quote from Alexander Solzhenitsyn about sort of, if only it were so simple, if only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. And who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart? And it seems important tonight to, as we have a winner in the election now, and to keep in mind this idea of scapegoating and projection, and how we turn places like the South into our own scapegoat. So can you talk a little bit about, as much as I love hearing about home, and there is an important part of that, it seems almost a defense of your home too. Can you talk about that poem a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting to me too that I find myself in a place where I want to defend the South, because growing up, I definitely was not in that place. I think a lot of us who are Southerners go through a process with our home because it's so easy to point out the flaws with a place like the South. But the older I got, and the more that I, read, and even the more that I traveled, the more I realized like the South is a part of the United States of America. Like, we're in this country. Every state has their own past and present to contend with. I mean, you can look at a lot of these stories that we see of instances of police brutality, for example, or voter suppression, or you name it, whatever issue. They don't just happen here. It's not like these issues, are up against some sort of wall. Like I said in the poem, the Mason-Dixon line is imagined. It doesn't stop things, from happening outside of it. And so, yeah, I feel like now that I'm a poet and I'm able to, go to different places in the country, I always am telling people, you shouldn't think so reductively about the South, or even about where you live. Even if your state, for example, was blue a few nights ago, that doesn't mean that you have no work to do at all. It doesn't mean that there's not things that need to be, improved upon. And even if your state, like mine, is red, doesn't mean that there are not incredible community organizations and people here doing really fantastic and progressive work. We have to be a lot more nuanced with how we look at our communities and ourselves, honestly. Like you said, there's not really a way to cut out, the evil and just throw it in the trash. We're all whole humans. So that means we have a lot of layers to contend with.
Right. Can you talk a little bit more about your upbringing and how you developed this strong sense of home that seems to come through in your writing?
Yeah, I mean, I have to give credit to my parents for raising us the way that they did. We were always instructed to love each other, for one. I mean, that's one reason why home means so much to me, because my family is like, that's my group. Those are my people. That's everything, for me. And so that sort of extends when I start to think about other things that matter to me, like the South. I come at it in the same sort of way. Like, this is my home, these are my people, I love them. So I have to not only point out their flaws, but also defend them as well. Um, and yeah, we also grew up knowing that being Black was a thing to be proud of. My parents made absolutely sure that we knew we could be anything in the world. We could see ourselves in anything. We could see ourselves even in God. Being Black is not something to feel shame about. It's something to celebrate. And I'm just so grateful for that, because that's why I'm able to do what I do now, because that was my foundation.
What was it like to have that encouragement at home, but then to walk out of your home and to feel the other people othering you as they do? As we do all.
Hard. It was really, really hard. I remember my very first encounter with racism was in kindergarten, actually, which kind of, I love to, love is an interesting word. I tell this story, I guess, because people are often quick to say, well, children shouldn't have to know about this or think about this. And it's true, they shouldn't, but they do. I mean, there's many people who look like me who have had to learn these lessons at a very early age. And like I said, I was 5. I had a best friend in kindergarten. He was a white boy, and we played house every single day. We were inseparable. And one day his family came to visit, and I remember seeing them looking at us, and I was 5, so I didn't really know what the expressions meant when they looked at us, pretending to be husband and wife. And the next day, I was cut out of the game, and I had been replaced by a white girl, and they said, you can't play with us. And I didn't understand why for many years. But that's when it began for me, which was totally different from being at home, where we were all accepted and we were taught that everybody is special, no matter how they look. So yeah, it's difficult for sure.
Yeah. Tell me what else you have to read for us tonight.
Well, let me look on my little list here. I have 3 other pieces that might be interesting. And I want to start with one from the new book, which I guess I should say comes out next October. So if you're a person who likes to buy books, that's when it'll be out. It makes a great gift. Any book makes a fantastic gift. Shameless plug. But this is a poem which maybe needs no real introduction. It's about God. God made my whole body. God made my whole body, and the way it moves, and the way it shakes and jiggles and plops. And God made my smile, and the 1,000 tears that fall from my eyes. God made the sun and the moon, and the leaf held loosely in my godson's perfect little hand. And God made the summer breeze, and the guitar Ron Isley crooned over. And God made the grass, and the bugs, and the dogs, and the trees. And God made all of our bodies to make waste. And God made even the waste that lives in us. And God made the way the world spins, and the way it will shake us right off if we don't act right. And God made the rivers which make it possible for us to drink. And God made the clouds which hold the rain. And God made the birds which fly and the wolves that howl. God made the folds of my brain and the thoughts that burrow there. God made my belly, my uterus, and all the little eggs which might become children. God made the doubt that rests there, like bubbling gas. God made the silence I wrap around myself some nights alone. God made the music we sing and the music we hate. God made the ears which help us stay balanced, help us to hear what people say behind our backs and in front of them. God made sweet potato pie and aunties and mamas who know how to add just enough nutmeg. God made my whole body. And God made my grandma and her gold tooth. And God made my grandma and her curly wig. And God made my grandma I didn't know. And God made my grandpa who was a ghost and my grandpa who was a terror. God made fear and the way it slices us up thin and flimsy. God made the way a hand quivers before it strikes. God made pain. God made the blood which runs and keeps us running. God made an everlasting red. Okay. And let's see. Now I'm going to read. You know what? I'm going to read a poem about cotton, because maybe that's on brand for me as a Southerner. But this is a poem that I wrote. It's in the second book. Dark Thing. It's in the second book. I wrote it after going to Whole Foods one day with my sister. And Whole Foods is not my like number one place to shop because it's a little expensive, honestly. Let's not kid ourselves. But we were there. And in the front, there's like this, the display with all the flowers that are always so beautiful. And on this particular day in that flower section, I saw something that really just gave me pause. It was these bouquets, or like, I guess, arrangements of 3 like stems of cotton. And they were not, clean. They were kind of like a little grimy, and they were wrapped in cellophane, and they were for sale for $9.95. And it made me stop in my tracks immediately. I mean, because for one, I had never seen cotton sold in this way. Like, it just seemed really odd to me. But also the price of it and the place that I was in, because as we know, Whole Foods doesn't necessarily set up shop in certain kinds of communities. And so all I could think about was my own grandmother, and a lot of us who are Southern, and really, I guess, everybody, because everybody somehow comes from the South, it seems. Everybody I meet has some like cousin whose cousin, was from Alabama. But a lot of us have ancestors who were sharecroppers. So that's one layer. My grandmother was a sharecropper. But as a Black Southerner, as a Black person, period, I have ancestors who were enslaved, who picked cotton and did not make anything close to $9.95 for 3 little dirty stems of that cotton. So I channeled all my rage into this poem, because what I really wanted to do is just like start flipping stuff, in the Whole Foods, but we can't do those things. So I wrote this poem instead, and it is called Broken Sonnet for the Decorative Cotton for Sale at Whole Foods. Who knew? All you had to do was wrap 3 stems of dirty cotton in cellophane, call it a bouquet, and sell it on the white side of town to make a decent living. Grandmother, instead of picking clean each spiny mouth, why didn't you weave the woodsy stalks into a wreath, the perfect autumnal decor in suburban Alabama? Instead of sharecropper, factory worker, cleaner of White House, why not start an Etsy shop? Make little cotton ribbons to adorn blonde curls. String your daughter's baby teeth on a thin gold rope and call them pearls.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm always struck in these readings how how literary writing comes as close to the spiritual as anything spiritual that is codified or religious. And I guess I want to ask you a bit about what the word faith means to you, and maybe you can expound a bit about maybe how your upbringing around that word, and yeah, can you talk more about that?
Sure. Well, yeah, I guess for me, just starting with the writing, it definitely is a spiritual experience for me, because I guess the way that I understand spirit or God or whatever you'd like to name it, is that it's in everything, and that we are given these gifts. In my case, it happens to be writing, that we can use to make the world better, or to help others, or to educate, what have you. And so, for me, writing is definitely a part of that practice. As far as my upbringing, I was raised to believe in God and to find my own relationship with God. Although I am Southern and although I am Black, I was not raised in a church, but I was raised with faith, if that makes any sense. My mom and my dad made sure that we knew, for one, that we had, a choice in finding out what it is that we believed in, but also they shared with us their own beliefs. And for me, that has resulted in a really strong faith in God, and a commitment to being a good person, to being obedient to the spirit, as I call it, which means writing and giving my all in that endeavor as well. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I see faith.
Yeah, I'm struck by especially the poem you read in the last section about how God made your whole body. I mean, the sense of wholeness comes through in that, and also in many of your poems. And I guess related to that is the sense of being aware of the danger of othering. And I guess can you speak a bit more about how writing and faith and has keeps you on your path?
Well, these are some real easy questions here, Brad, that you're giving me. These are big and difficult. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like, I guess a lot of it has been figuring out what my purpose is. I think a lot of us are always trying to figure out, why am I here? What am I here to do? And for me, it's always seemed very clear that I'm here to write, for one, but I'm also here to create and spread light, whatever that might mean. So that manifests in writing and showing up authentically on the page, and sharing with others, in my daily life, just trying to like not be a horrible person, and spread, like I said, that light. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I just feel like this is me walking in my purpose, being a writer, being a teacher. And that's kind of what keeps me going, because I feel like this is why I'm here. So I got to keep doing it.
And does spreading light sometimes mean going into the dark places and
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
talk about that.
Yes. Spreading light does not mean pretending that everything is good. That to me would be spreading darkness, because it's allowing us to ignore things that are happening. So for me, spreading light includes telling the story of my state, of my country, talking about the things that are painful. Like there's a lot of poems in the second book about Black people who have been killed by the state, capital state, so whatever organization you want to attribute that to, the police, concerned citizens, what have you. And to me, that's still light bringing, because it's shedding light, so to speak, on things that are happening, but it's also allowing people to understand my experience and the experiences of others. And if they don't share that experience, it's allowing them a road in to empathy, which I think is like a huge key in stopping a lot of this systemic oppression that we have experienced in our country.
Talk to me about tap dancing.
Oh gosh.
I mean, I guess one of the things that comes through in your writing is the body, and you write about your body, and I'm wondering, I mean, tap dancing, using the body. Talk about how the body embodiment matters in writing, and then the things you have to say.
Well, let me start by saying, everyone, I would not call myself a tap dancer. I'm a person who enjoys tap dancing, and I have tapped, but I'm not, as good as some of my favorite tap dancers at all. But yeah, I've always loved watching dancing, and gymnastics was like my favorite sport as a kid, watching, not doing, because I was not blessed with the particular athleticism, to do all of that. But yeah, I remember falling in love with tap dancing, watching Sesame Street, actually, because Savion Glover, who's one of the husbands in my head, which maybe you'll ask about, but he was on Sesame Street and he tapped, and I was immediately like, I love this. Now, perhaps I loved it because I loved him, but I still love tap dancing, all these years afterward. And it does feel a lot like creating poetry when you're tap dancing or dancing in any style, because you're first of all having to trust yourself to do the thing, but also you're putting yourself out there in a very vulnerable way, that doesn't allow you to hide anything at all, which is like poetry to me.
And we were talking before the show started here about food. And food is something that's important to you. You like to cook. Tell me a little bit more. I just want to get to know you a bit better and these passions outside of writing.
Yeah, I love to cook. I mean, I would say first and foremost, I love to eat. Eating is a really fantastic activity, which sometimes can come to bite you the older you get, because the food just doesn't leave. It just attaches to your, hips and everything. But yeah, I love to cook. I don't know if I would say that I have like a signature dish per se. I just like to cook whatever. So whether that's biscuits or, stir fry or a cake or whatever it is that I want to eat, I cook. In my house, we made things, there wasn't a lot of let's go out and get this. It was, let's just make it, so everything that you can think of, like donuts, me and my mom make donuts together, anything at all.
As an artist now, observing, the latest, the election and what's going on in the country right now. I mean, can you talk about your sense of hope or lack thereof? How you're feeling now about how we go forward and in the healing that needs to be done.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to a friend about this today, and I think it does need to be said very clearly that I am breathing a sigh of relief right now because of the result. But that sigh of relief is not a sigh of erasure, if that makes any sense. There's still clearly a lot that needs to be done in our country. And I think some of the answer to that, at least now that we maybe don't have to keep our eyes fixed on what's going on in Washington for fear of, a catastrophe, we can really dig into our communities, because we've seen in this election, especially, the power of communities and community organizing. And I've always felt like, at least as an adult, I've always felt like communities are where everything actually happens. That's where you can effect a lot of change for real people, in your space. So I'm hoping that moving forward, people will really dig deeper into their communities. And in the case of the South, I hope a lot of the people who have left the South will come back, because that's what's going to help us, to progress and to keep moving more forward. And hopefully everybody else around the country digs into wherever they are in whatever way they can.
I know you're a teacher and you teach writing at the high school level, correct?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Can you talk about how writing can be useful for this digging deeper, and how you do that, how writing helps you dig deeper, but also how you might tell other writers that they can use their practice in writing for this kind of work you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it's really incredible. It has been incredible to me what writing can do, like all the various things that it can do tangibly in people's lives. So, for example, I guess I'll give two examples, one in the classroom, one out of the classroom. Inside of the classroom, the teaching of writing can really change the way a young person, or really any person, thinks about themselves. I remember being a young person taking writing classes and discovering that my voice and my thoughts actually mattered, and I could put them on paper and see them there outside of my own head, and somebody else could hear them or read them, and we could start a conversation. And there's a lot of healing that can happen there, but also a lot of self-realization that can happen there as well, and a lot of empathy you can learn by reading different authors and by writing your own story as well. Outside of the classroom, I'm very involved in the community, and we have a really vibrant literary scene in Birmingham. And one of the things that we do is this event called 100,000 Poets for Change, which is a worldwide event. And we have our own iteration of that in Birmingham. And a couple of years ago, we did our usual thing, which is we fundraise for a local organization, and we have poets to read, or we get them published, or however we choose to do it. And we were fundraising that year for Shut Down Etowah, which is a nonprofit that works to end the inhumane practices at the Etowah County Detention Center, which is one of the worst immigrant detention centers in our country. And during this event that we had published some local poets, and we had two events in the city, and we were trying to raise money, like I said, for this group. And we learned maybe like halfway through our campaign that if we raised $1,000, that the Shut Down Etowah group would match that and actually be able to free someone from detention so they could return to their families. And we were able to exceed that amount and literally free a human being from detention so he could return to his children and his family. And that was one of the moments where I thought, okay, we did this just by doing poetry, asking people to come listen to poems, And also we had some people to read letters from the people who were detained. But just by spreading the word, like literal words, we were able to raise dollars to free a human. So it really is limitless what you can do with your work.
We have a lot of writers in the audience, and can you talk a little bit about how you juggle your creative life with the need to make a living, and how you prioritize writing in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I gotta take it back to my parents because they knew that we were all very artistic and supported us in our artistry. But they also were very clear, you're gonna have to be able to support yourself. Like you have to be able to feed yourself. So we always knew if we were going to pursue art as a career, we had to have a plan. And so I decided pretty early on that I wanted to be a teacher of some kind. Now, I used to think that I wanted to do the whole university thing, and I used to want to be a university president. Not so sure about that anymore. Like that's some stress I don't know that I want on my life, right now. But yeah, I definitely am fed by being a teacher, literally and figuratively. I mean, it's my job, but also it keeps me invigorated to write, being around other writers and writers who are just discovering their voices. And I guess I always try to keep writing as not my main breadwinning thing, because I feel like if I put that pressure on it, and there's plenty of poets who do this, who are able to just write for a living. But for me, I would rather keep that sort of sacred. I mean, any money that I make as a poet, I'm not turning it away, clearly. Thank you for people who give money for poetry, but I don't want that to be the thing that I have to worry about, like, oh, I gotta write so I can pay these bills. Like, I would rather have a job that does that work so I can write and just enjoy whatever happens on the writing side. Because I think it would kill my creativity for it to be the thing that I have to do to survive.
How do we as a country, especially white Americans, how do we make sure that Black Lives Matters continues to be at the forefront, or continues to be, something important in this country as we go forward? And we have a pandemic going on. Obviously, lots of things are happening, and I guess, do you have concern that it's going to just slip out of the as it probably already has in some ways?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's a lifelong concern for me, that people will decide that it has been solved. Like we saw a lot of this when President Obama was elected. A lot of people said, well, we're in a post-racial society now, which I thought was just like wild, because I thought to myself, well, I'm still experiencing racism. So which society is it that's post-racial? I live here. In many ways, it amplified a lot of things, as perhaps we can see by what happened in the next 4 years after the Obama presidency. But I think one thing that people can do is to go back to that empathy piece, honestly, the listening part, the not centering oneself. If you find yourself in a position of privilege, you have to try to find a way to take the ego out of it and hear someone else's experience and not hear it as an attack on you specifically. If I am to say to any, white American, I have been discriminated against or oppressed by white supremacy, that is not the same as me saying you specifically have oppressed me. You see what I'm saying? Like if there's a way to not make it so, I guess, self-centered and defense bringing, I guess, that's how we can kind of move forward. If we accept that the fight for Black lives will make way for, all of us to become valued in society. It's not the case that we want, some people have said, oh, Black Lives Matter just wants Black supremacy. And really the project of any sort of liberation movement is so that there is no such thing as any kind of supremacy. We understand that white supremacy hurts everyone, including white people. And that's kind of what I mean. Like if we take ourselves out of this, but I'm good. Like, yes, you may be good, but let's put that aside and see what's happening. What is hurting another person? What can you do with your power to maybe turn some of these things that have happened to other people?
Do you have a short list of books that you recommend, that privileged people read? You have a favorite book on this matter of white fragility, that kind of thing?
I honestly don't have a reading list that I would specifically point you to, but I would say as much as those books that like White Fragility that talk about these topics in a more, I don't know, academic sort of way, as much as those are useful, I would almost say go to the literature. Read some Toni Morrison, read Nikki Giovanni, read June Jordan, Lucille Clifton. You can read me if you want to, read the literature of these people who have been oppressed, because we are telling you the honest story. And it might be easier for you to enter that conversation if it's not framed as, here is how you learn how to be not racist, but instead is framed as, here is a story that you can access and relate to. And I've found in my life that through poetry, I've been able to maybe reach people who might bristle at something like, let me read White Fragility and learn how I am white and fragile. But instead, let me listen to this poem about this girl who was called the N-word by someone, and let me try to understand how that feels, or let me try to look back on my life or in my family and see who may still think that that's appropriate, if that makes sense. Hopefully it makes
To
sense.
move people into their hearts, really, then out of their heads, and not just read about something, but to experience it through the literature.
Exactly.
Well, you left a low-hanging fruit for me with your topic of husbands in your head. Can you explain what that means? And excuse my cough. I'm getting over bronchitis. So
yeah, I hope that you keep recovering, Brad, from bronchitis. My goodness. So the husbands in my head is this weird thing that I have. I'm not married in reality. I'm, single and awesome. But I have accumulated this list of imaginary husbands that are mostly artists. Maybe they're all, well, yeah, mostly artists who I've loved for a very long time. And I always say imaginary husbands are great because they can't hurt you and they can't leave you. They're always there. So I'm going to, I guess, go through this list while we wait for Brad. So number one husband in my head is Gregory Hines. If you don't know who that is, I'm sorry. Was an amazing actor, singer, tap dancer, just a wonderful man. And he's the number one forever. I feel bad for whoever I do marry in the future because Gregory Hines is still my number one husband. Sammy Davis Jr. is another one, also an incredible entertainer. Savion Glover, also a tap dancer. There's a theme here, perhaps you see. And Chadwick Boseman is also on that list. And he was before he passed, but now he's joined the rest of the passed on husbands in my head list.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. I would love to have you read again, if you would.
Sure. Yeah, I will do. What will I do? I want to end on maybe it's longer-ish. So I'll just read that one. Let me find the page. It's also going to be in the new book. And the story behind it, is that I was commissioned by, I guess by HarperCollins, you would say, to write a poem for this book they had coming out called Southern Women. And the book's out now. You can buy it anywhere that books are sold. And in this book, it was an accumulation of essays and interviews with notable Southern women. So the editor found me and asked me if I would write a poem to go in the front of the book, which I was very excited about because it was my first huge commission for a single poem. Going back to that, this is not my day job, but I definitely don't turn my back when they offer some coins for poetry. And so the question that she posed to me was, what does it mean to be a Southern woman? And so this poem that I wrote is my answer to that question. And it's in the Golden Shovel format using a poem called Black Women by Lucille Clifton, who is my favorite poet of all time. I urge all of you to read anything she's ever written. She's fantastic. There's 2 collected works, books of her poems that you can purchase. Anyway, so this is, I cannot talk about the South without talking about Black women. My grandmothers made America, made the fibers that made us warm, made us invincible, heroines. To tell you who they are, I must start with who they are not. Servants, kitchen-bound mammies, silently obedient wives. We can't, in our modern comforts, imagine the survival they learned was theirs to claim. Can't hold the light they burned through this colonial darkness. What tricks this nation, this American South pulled minute by minute to keep my grandmothers convinced. The body you're in is not enough. Your race and your gender work together to mark you less, to mark you takeable. But what they didn't know was that my grandmothers still had an unmovable strength, enough to build a bridge from here to heaven. I know when I leave this broken earth, I'll find them there, sweetening every hour. My grandmothers raised a generation of American men. There is no other way to say this. Look at any Southern family and you'll find somewhere in a past most will not claim, a Black woman. These men who call themselves bootstrapping and self-made, somewhere there's a Black woman and her unthanked hands who lifted them to where they are now. My father tells a story of the sons of his grandmother's employers, how they, instead of the pension she was promised, decided to give her a damned old tire, an old suitcase, dusty in the yard. What thanks is this for the years she raised that family, for the care they cannot forget. My father could never forgive those men, their Southern tradition, their American tradition. Even now, they tell us Black women are going to save this whole nation with votes or magic or our style taken and renamed. But this is no longer the land of massas and mammies, and we are only superheroines for our own daughters and sons. My grandmothers did not give their lives for me to keep nursing this country, to keep shucking and jiving in a bizarro American dream. My grandmothers are worth more than this corrupt remembering. Now there is no room for the Dixieland lie. We no longer hold these truths you made us accept. Under God, yes. We hear him singing a song of powerful love, despite the united hate of America. Grandmothers, women made of salt and spirit, you are faith continuous. Continue us, raise us to be heroes and heroines, to tell this country that we are not mules, not beasts. You, an army of workers and wives, we hid our fears and woes in your indestructible, ever-present ladiness. The blood you pass down to us is all we will ever need to save our lives. Oh, Brad, I think you're muted.
I wanted to ask about what your grandmothers would have to say and think and feel about the fact we have a Black vice president elect now. Is that
What would they say? That's a good question. I haven't thought about what they might say if they were here. I mean, I think they would be happy. They would be very happy to see a different president than the one that we've had for these past 4 years. And I think they would be happy to know that another Black person has made it to the White House. I'm sure that they would also have more nuanced reactions than what I can give them at this moment. You know, they were very clever women, so I'm sure there would be some funny things they would say, and you know, some cautious things they would say, because they both lived through a lot, you know, sharecropping, like I said, and just the ills of our nation. So
yeah. Well, I want to thank you for being here tonight. We've got a few more minutes. And is there anything else? I would love to have you read one more to close with. I know this is an extra one. Do you have something else on hand?
I do. I do. I will read a poem about watermelon. I was very fortunate. The nonprofit that I run, the Magic City Poetry Festival, we had a workshop with Camille Dungy, who is an incredible poet, essayist person, yesterday. And she was teaching us about nature poetry and how to write in a sort of double vision, like writing about something that people have a certain expectation of and giving it a new expectation. So I wrote about watermelon, which is unfortunately often associated with negative images of Black people. If you remember, like porch monkeys or pickaninnies eating watermelon and the watermelon eating contests, etc. So I wanted to write about that and give it my spin. Because we never have been monkeys, porch or otherwise. We had no porch, so we ate our watermelon at the kitchen table. We sliced it, those green glowing orbs which sat so loudly on tables and truck beds at the farmer's market, that market which we visited almost always before continuing to Bessemer to see Grandma Ola. We sliced it up into wedges or halves or fleshy red hunks, and Mom sprinkled it always with salt. Salt which made that too fresh, too water, too ripe melon pop. Salt sucked off the seeds which we spit into piles on the table. Seeds which we imagined might grow more melons if we dropped them in Dad's backyard garden, and which never quite grew in that garden where it seemed everything could grow. Even if they sprouted, those melons would never balloon and make good fruit. Although I never liked watermelon, even now it sometimes makes me gag, sometimes a swish caught in the throat. Although I didn't perk up at the green skin, I still ate it greedily, just to be able to smile with my mother, who loves it so well, just to catch that salty glint in her eye and call it my own.
Thank you. What's next for you? What's coming up for you? Do you have a new book coming out next year?
Mm-hmm.
Any topics you plan to write about? Anything you want to tout before we end tonight?
Well, that new book has a lot of poems in it that are coming out this fall and some in the spring as well. So if people want to read some things of mine, I have some poems coming out in Poetry magazine in December, and also in Shenandoah magazine. Excuse me, but you can find all that information on my website. I try to post all those links as soon as I have them. But yeah, I'm just trying to survive till next year. That's all I'm trying to do.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you, everybody. If there's any other questions, I'm happy to open it up for a few minutes here. If there's not, we can all say goodbye, and thank you to Ashley. It's been a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it Carmel? Carmel?
Carmel's our founder, yes. And yeah, well, I have a minute. So Writing for Peace puts out a couple of books a year, and this is one of the latest ones. It's Resistance, and I invite people out there to go to the Writing for Peace website and find out more about how to buy that. It's a beautiful book. Obviously, the art is incredible on the cover. Wonderful artwork, essays, poetry throughout the book. So, thought I'd give a little shout out for Writing for Peace tonight too. So, anyone else you want to unmute people? Juniper.
Yeah, I already did. They have the ability to unmute themselves.
If anyone else wants to say anything, yes, great. And many thanks to Juniper. She's our producer on this show, and she's a huge asset for us and behind the scenes. And sometimes we get to see her too. So great.
Thank you, Brad. I want to say thank you, Ashley. That was a wonderful, wonderful reading and sharing of yourself and your process in life. Your poems are kick-ass, awesome, duende, and I think we need more of them. And I just thank you for this evening and your time. So,
thank you, Juniper. Thank you for working behind the scenes and for inviting me here. Hopefully, everyone enjoyed. Oh, thank you, Adrian, for those kind words. This was nice. This is a nice way to end my day, for sure.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much. And then Phil, do you have a question? Anything, anyone else before we go? We have one more minute.
what American or what American or Black American writers are really important for you beside Lucille Clifton?
Yeah, besides Lucille, Miss Lucille, let me put some respect on her name. Besides Miss Lucille, I would say Gwendolyn Brooks is a huge one for me. I'm getting into June Jordan more and more. She's really great. Rita Dove is one I would suggest. There are so many. Kevin Young is one that I really like as well. I'm going to end it there because I feel like I could just keep naming people for like so long, but those are a few.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much, and everyone stay safe and well in this difficult time. And what a nice shining of light tonight to have you here, Ashley. So thank you so much.
Yes,
And
thank you.
yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
good night.
Good
Wonderfully.
night.
Thank you. Oh, I'm going to switch over. I think Brad left before I could switch it over to him. Thanks again, Ashley. Thank you so much.
Thank
Take
you.
care. I'll email you.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.